Oh God, Dane.
Today we will be looking at the OG Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy. The game that was to be Square's final game before the studio shut down, this RPG went on to become the most famous game franchise in the world. At the beginning of the game, you are able to create your team from 6 different classes. These are Fighter, White Mage, Black Mage, Red Mage, Thief, and Black Belt. Halfway through the game, the classes are upgraded. The Fighter becomes the Knight, the White Mage becomes the White Wizard, I see what you did there. The Black Mage becomes the Black Wizard, the Red Mage becomes the Red Wizard, the Thief becomes the Ninja, and the Black Belt becomes the Master. We will be doing 2 tiers, one of the first half, then the other with the upgraded classes. And stick around to the end where I'll tell you the optimal party for this game. Okay, let's get started. Tier. The Thief. The biggest reason you would want a Thief is to increase your chances of escaping battle. Unfortunately, due to poor development, there is no such increase. From stats to equipment to almost everything else, this character just sucks. The Black Mage. You might be thinking, wait, those magic attacks are strong, right? Well, again, due to poor design, intelligence does not boost your magic attack, which makes equipment a bust for mages. Aside from the iconic design, this character is pretty much useless. Low tier. The White Mage. The only reason this character is here is because of life and the ability to equip the heal staff. The same problems the Black Mage have still apply to this character. On top of that, support arts can be somewhat useful in this game, which has bumped her to low tier. Mid tier. The Black Belt is a character that requires invested time. He can get strong, but only after a very long period of time. The only other positive of the Black Belt is that he's cheaper to equip than the Fighter, and towards the end of the game can be almost as strong. Top tier. The Red Mage. This character has all of the pluses of the White and Black Mage, but can withstand attacks, which makes him the optimal support character. Bringing a Red Mage along on the adventure is almost a must for an optimal run of the game. The God tier. The Fighter. No surprise. Strong, dependable, able to equip any armor, stock up on items, and watch this guy wreck the opposition. There is no contest as far as the first half of the game goes. He is simply the best. Now let's move on to the second half of the game. Once Bahamut acknowledges your bravery, your classes are upgraded. With this comes some new skills and stats, so let's see how these stack up afterwards. The tier. Black Wizard. Sorry my friend, you still suck. And for all the same reasons. Besides, you ditched the VV look, so no one likes you anyway. Low tier. White Wizard. Again, for the same reasons. I do like the sprite change though. Mid tier. Ninja. The Thief's upgrade in sprite art isn't the only cool thing. He also gains the ability to wield black magic, which is cool. The ninja's greatest strength is that he is cheaper to equip than the knight. Top tier. The Master. Again, if you are ready to put the time needed to level this guy, you will eventually get the ability to hit enemies 4 times, which can almost do as much damage as the knight. On top of this, he doesn't equip weapons, so in essence, he is the cheapest character to equip. Red Wizard. Again, the best support character in the game. Equip this guy with the heal staff and the heal helm and make his job to keep the other 3 alive. Again, this guy is a must for any party. Finally, God tier. And we have the Knight. Again, a big surprise. He is still the beast he has always been, but now can use some white magic, which has its uses. Equip him with the silver sword and watch him devastate the masses. Now, as for optimal party, start the game with 3 fighters and 1 red mage. By the end of the game, you will have 3 knights and 1 red wizard. Equip your knights with your best equipment and make the red wizard's sole purpose to keep everyone alive. If you want to change, you can swap a knight for a master or even a ninja, and perhaps another knight for a white mage. But that is the optimal party. Final Fantasy II may be the most famous broken RPG in the history of gaming. Its exploits are well known, but let's dive into what made this game a beautiful yet broken mess. FF2 tried to differentiate itself from its predecessor by introducing a more story-driven narrative, set characters, and a well-intentioned stat system. You see, the idea behind this system was that the more a player used magic, or healed, or attacked with a sword, the better their stats in that area would become. Actions ticked a point system that leveled your stats according to your decisions. The exploit is that with a bit of intentional usage and some grinding, the player could easily manipulate their stats into being unbearably broken. The most common method is getting into a battle with a weak enemy and having your party members attack and heal each other. If you equip 2 shields, your characters can attack without doing any damage. The experience is determined by how long a battle goes on for, so if you artificially extend a battle, attacking each other in the process, in a couple hours you will have max stats before even reaching the first town. Another interesting mechanic here is that magic spells grow in potency the more you use them, but status effect spells like Death, Toad, or Teleport grow in accuracy the more you use them. Almost every enemy and boss is affected by Toad, so if you grind that up, you have an instant win button. Overall, even with some fixes in the GBA version, this title is notoriously busted in all the right ways. It's been a while since we last examined a Final Fantasy game, so today we'll be looking at Final Fantasy III. The third installment in this now iconic series was never originally released in the West, and only recently came over in a few different forms. The one we'll be looking at is the DS remake, which came with additional story beats, slightly more fleshed out characters, and some decent 3D graphics. There are more than 20 jobs that unlock through your playthrough, and each varies widely in usefulness. Each of the 4 party members can access any of these jobs and basically use them equally, so we'll be focusing strictly on which jobs are best for your playthrough and endgame. Oh, and stick around till the end where we'll reveal the optimal party for your playthrough. And now, without further ado, I give you the tier. The Onion Knight is a class locked behind a stupid internet gimmick that forces you to play with other players in order to unlock it, and some secret dungeons as well. I hate this stuff. Just ignore the Onion Knight. Next on this list is the Evoker. This is your summoner light. Summons can be pretty powerful and incredibly useful in a pinch, but not here. Evokers are unable to control the outcome of a summon. When summoning, you get either an offensive attack or a defensive buff, and the outcome is random. This makes any strategy go out the window and leaves this guy as the worst class in the game. Last on the tier is the Ranger. Ranger really is here because it's just absolutely outclassed in every single way. There is nothing the Ranger does that another class can't do better. The low tier. First on the low tier is the Scholar. Now, a lot of you might be thinking that the Scholar belongs in the tier as well, but there are a few things that are going for it. First, it has some of the highest intelligence in the game and can do double damage with attack items. Sure, this doesn't make them some crazy broken class, but if you want to take a Scholar to the end game, there is a small light at the end of that tunnel. Next is the Geomancer. Geomancers call upon the land around them to make a random target attack that costs 0 MP. The biggest issue here is that you miss out on exploiting elemental weaknesses of enemies most of the time. Generally, if you're in a water area, the enemies will have an affinity to water, so yeah, better to just use Black Mage. And speaking of Black Mage, the final member of the low tier is the Black Mage. This class is great and can be a powerhouse. Heck, you could take a Black Mage to the end, but unfortunately the classes that replace it are pretty much straight up upgrades. The Sage or Magus will always be the better choice in the end. Alright, we're going to break the mid-tier up into 2 parts since we have so many classes, so we'll start with the lower mid-tier. First up is the Bard. The Bard is surprisingly good in Final Fantasy III. First, its physical attack is surprisingly high for a support class and can hang with the other physical attackers on your party. Second, you get some amazing buffs and debuffs that can be pivotal in some of the more difficult fights. At the end of the day, this isn't really endgame material, but that doesn't make it a bad class. Next is the Red Mage. The Red Mage is probably the single best class for early and mid-game, sporting the most magical accessibility and decent physical attack. Unfortunately, like the Black Mage, this class is completely replaced by the Sage, making it obsolete. A White Mage is always a must in a party. Of the 3 main casters, Black Mage, Red Mage, and White Mage, the White Mage will probably stick around your party the longest. But then you'll unlock the Devout, and at that point, there's no longer a reason to use this class. The Dragoon is similar to the Knight, but with increased magical defense over physical defense. I think overall the physical defense is more important, but magical defense is definitely needed at times. Unfortunately, when you get the Ninja, there will no longer be a need for this Leaping Dragon. The Warrior is one of the first physical damaging classes you get, and would be good if it wasn't replaced pretty quickly by the knight, then later by the ninja. Now, I will say this, advance can dish out some awesome damage, but sacrificing a little bit damage for survivability, better equipment, and just overall more utility is worth it in the end. Final member of the lower mid-tier is the monk. The monk can be an incredibly cheap powerhouse with the right amount of time. His speed is a concern, but no means makes him a bad early game choice. Now, the monk is pretty much replaced by the black belt, but until then, this is not a bad route to take your main attacker. The upper mid-tier. The thief is generally overlooked in this game. There's the normal stuff that this class brings, which is stealing items and running from battle. Stealing items eventually becomes useless, and running, though nice, isn't really required. But given the right equipment, the thief can keep itself viable as an attacker via its incredible speed and similar loadout to a ninja. The summoner is your magical DPS and can wipe the floor with every enemy in the game. Your summons now serve a single purpose, damage output, and they do it well. The Magus is quite controversial online. In fact, this class was one of the hardest to place. This is your powered up version of a black mage, but it's difficult to decide if ultimately it's better than the sage. And no one online seems to agree either. So here it is. I'm setting this class on the upper mid tier, and you can all fight about it in the comments below. The Knight is your most diverse physical class for the majority of the game. This class is the second best tank in the game and can come close to matching the warrior's damage output. Now, the Dark Knight, Dragoon, and especially the Viking contend for best spot here. And I think a lot is left to player preference, but you just can't go wrong with the Knight. The Dark Knight is the most useful class for taking out annoying mobs. It can attack all enemies the same despite placement on the battlefield, but the Dark Knight suffers during boss battles and isn't as useful come the late game. The final member of the upper mid tier is the Sage. The Sage can use certain summons, white magic, and black magic, making it the ideal over the red mage. Now, you do sacrifice the physical damage of the red mage and the high MP of the focused magic classes, but that still isn't enough to deter the Sage from being one of the best endgame magic users in Final Fantasy III. The top tier. The Viking can't hit to save its life, and thus it struggles to dish out any damage. But that doesn't matter. The reason to use the Viking is as a tank. Set the Viking in the back row and draw all attacks from the enemy while the rest of your party goes to town. There is no better tank in the game. The Black Belt, with quite a bit of work, can be a contender for best damage dealer in the game. The issue here is that you're incredibly squishy and quickly become a Phoenix Down nuisance. If you're going with the Black Belt, make sure you pair it with a Viking that can help take some of the heat off. The God tier. There are two classes in the God tier, the first being the Devout. This is the best supporting class in the game, with incredibly high magic and access to the best white magic, including spells like Holy and Tornado. This is a must for any endgame team. The final member of the God tier and top of this list is the Ninja, because why not? Throw is strictly unfair when it comes to damage, and the Ninja can equip any weapon in the game. This class has higher magical defense than Dragoon and incredible agility. The biggest issue you'll run into is their abysmal physical defense, but given the Vikings' tanking capabilities, who cares? Now, as for optimal party, if you're planning on using the Ninja or Black Belt, then you have to have the Viking as a tank. The Viking should be supported by a Devout as well. That leaves two open slots for DPS. Ninja, Black Belt, Summoner, or Magus are your best choices in the endgame, but it's up to the player. My recommended party would be a Ninja, Viking, Devout, and well, whatever you want. Final Fantasy IV should be recognized above all else as one of the most influential RPGs in history. Not only did it create an epic grand tale with characters that actually have personalities, but it also created the ATB system, which yes, may be out of date now, but was an impressive advancement in the day. Now, I don't think the game holds up as well as many claim it does, but it's still a game in one of the greatest RPG series, so let's get into it. To begin, a tier list of this game is complicated. There have been multiple ports, versions, and even remakes since its release in 1991. Each of these reiterations tampered with the formula slightly, and so a universal list is kind of ridiculous. which is exactly why I made one.
NANI?!
Yes, my friends, I have done the research, and I believe that with a little bit of understanding that there will be some minor exceptions and a little Moogle dust, that we have the definitive tier list for Final Fantasy IV. So let's get into it by starting with the tier. First up is the Spoony Bard Edward. Not at all a surprise. Edward has been lauded as one of the worst party members in the series, and with good reason. In most versions, you can't take him to the end game, and in the ones that you can, he requires such outrageous grinding to even get him competing with the top tier. Overall, you have a squishy, mostly useless support mage that is in and out pretty quick. The second and final member of the tier is Cid. Not only is Cid incredibly slow, but he also struggles with survivability since his weapons are usually two-handed and cut him off from using shields. Magic spells will almost certainly wipe him off the map. His weapon is useful against mechanical enemies, but during the short section of the game he's usable, you will see very few if any. Overall, no matter which version you're playing, Edward and Cid are pretty useless. The low tier. Fusoya, I'm sure I said that wrong, is one of the most powerful mages in the game. You only acquire him for a short time, but he is a very welcome addition during that time. If he had a higher mana pool, I think he might have crawled up higher on this list, but unfortunately, he's gone as soon as you get him and drains you of your ethers. Tella and Fusoya function pretty much the same, though the sections of the game where you can use Tella are made so much easier because he's there. His situational usefulness here is very welcome, as his powerful magic is only hindered by low MP, and not to mention some low HP as well. The final member of the low tier is Porom. Porom is the white mage sister of Palom, and unfortunately just doesn't serve a purpose beyond spamming Cure. Her cry ability is practically broken in the DS and GBA versions, but even that won't save her here. I think the other issue here is that during the section of the game where she is available, you really just don't need much healing. If you took her into the end game, you'd find that every boss destroyed her within seconds. So at the end of the day, she landed on the low tier. The mid tier. First up on the mid tier is the Dark Knight Cecil. This is the form of the protagonist throughout the first half of the game and is pretty useful. He trivializes the early game with incredible weapons, AoE attacks, and high strength, but as soon as you approach the mid game, he takes a complete nosedive. This was obviously on purpose, but reaching the Mount of Ordeals and facing off against undead opponents pretty much solidifies this guy in the mid tier. Palom, during his short stint in your party, is incredibly versatile and useful. He ranks up there with Rydia as far as magic damage goes, and he even has some decent survivability, at least compared to his sister. When taking the endgame, if you're playing that version, he starts to lose steam as many enemies can counter his black magic, and he doesn't have the summon ability like Rydia. The final member of the mid tier is young Rydia. I have to pause here to recognize just how cool the character transformations in this game are. I mean, you have two characters that literally transform. Not to mention that Rydia's design is just top notch. Anyway, when you first get Rydia, she has both white and black magic and ends up being one of the more consistent party members. The top tier. First on the top tier, and one of the endgame team members in any version, is Kain. Kain is simply a DPS machine. His jump ability, if timed right, can be highly effective, and even if not timed right, you can always accidentally live through a team wipe and toss Phoenix downs like your life depended on it. Sure, he lacks the versatility of Edge or Cecil, but having the second highest normal damage in the game isn't too shabby. Next is Yang. Yang isn't an in-game teammate in most versions, but even so, he is an incredible physical damager with elemental claws that, with a bit of planning, can hand out incredible amounts of damage. He's the ultimate tank, able to survive almost any attack, and has respectable speed on top of that. Next on the top tier is another endgame party member, Adult Rydia. Rydia is one of your highest damage dealers with both black magic and summons to bring variation. Summons specifically become highly effective in the endgame as enemies can't counter them. I would have put Rydia in the god tier if it wasn't for the fact that you will be constantly reviving her. Rydia is one of the squishiest endgame characters with record low defense and HP. But if you can manage to keep her alive, she will be dishing out incredible damage. The final member of the top tier, and possibly the most controversial, is Edge. Similar to Rydia, the only thing going against Edge is his survivability. A soft breeze would take this guy down. But again, if you can keep him alive, his speed and strength, along with the boss-destroying throw ability, absolutely rockets this guy up to the top tier. Not to mention that he got a severe boost in the DS version, making him a little more tanky. The God tier. First on the God tier, and one of the most important party members in the game, is Rosa. Rosa is your endgame healer with a halfway decent physical attack. With the right equipment management, her elemental arrows can do some mid-tier damage. The main reason that she's on the God tier is her support and debuff spells. Final Fantasy IV places an emphasis on status buff and ailments, and nothing is more critical than the slow spell, which might as well be required for most boss fights. On top of all this, she's one of the most consistent party members in availability, solidifying her at the top. And the final member of the God tier and top of this list is Paladin Cecil. Not only is he a complete physical and magical tank, but he has high physical attack with elemental swords that can do heavy damage to enemies, and has support spells like Cover that make many of the squishy party members viable. From the moment you get him to the endgame, Paladin Cecil is a must-have for any endgame party. Today we will be finally looking at the jobs of Final Fantasy V. There are 26 jobs in total here, and man do we have a wide range. Now this is a well-established game with millions of fans. Everyone has their own judgments at this point, and I'm not about to change 25 years of solidified opinion. But I can sure as hell try. So let's get started with the tier. There is one undisputed class that deserves the right to be here, and that is the Berserker. This class is about as useful as turning your forward focus on auto drive in the middle of the Autobahn. Even with insane abuses the game's broken features, like retroing magic stat and using the Quake spell, only makes this slightly capable. The low tier. First up in the low tier,
and you better be grateful you were on the tier you won't go for a little bit.
Next up is the Geomancer. Geomancers attack using the terrain around them. If they are surrounded by water, they'll use water attacks. If underground, they'll use earth attacks. The attack is random in its potency and is pretty much useless against bosses. Next is the White Mage. Is a White Mage bad? No, not really. Are they good? No, not really. Let's move on to the Oracle. Luck-based jobs will probably always rate low here. Oracles are a weird magic hybrid of a few other classes that just doesn't work very well. Bards are the awkward cousin at your Christmas party. They're kind of an inside joke for anyone who's played the early Final Fantasies. In the end, there are just too many better classes to ever consider using this one. The final member of the low tier is the Thief. Thieves are a useful class for everything but battle. You'll use this job to net rare items and navigate certain hidden passages, but not for anything else. The lower mid-tier. Because this list is so long, I've broken the mid-tier into two parts. And first up on the lower mid-tier is the Mimic.
Don't you dare call out.
The Mimic is broken and possibly the second best job of the entire game. But it is entirely dependent on another job, which that job is entirely dependent on a bunch of other jobs. So the Mimic is in the lower mid-tier with the exception of when it's in the God tier. Let's move on. Next is the Dancer class. The Dancer class is a reskinned black mage, just random and less effective. But damn if Ferris doesn't look good. The Beastmaster is a pseudo-Pokemon job. Once you get enemies to lower HP, you can catch them, then release them to do some kind of attack. You can also take control of enemies as well. Ultimately, this makes this class only as good as the mobs around it, which aren't that great. Next up is one of Final Fantasy's oldest jobs, the Monk. The Monk is a fairly effective class. It's cheap due to the fact that you don't have to equip weapons. They also have insanely high attack, HP, and the killer move counter. The biggest problem with the Monk is that late game equipment completely outpaces it, even with some of the worst classes. The final job of the low mid-tier is the Necromancer. If you can juggle Drain Touch to heal yourself with your devastating Dark Arts, then this job is actually really useful. Unfortunately, it's harder than it looks, and the ability to not heal is actually pretty crippling in many fights. The upper mid-tier. First up on the upper mid-tier is the Jack of all magics, the Red Mage. This is about as middle ground as a job gets. You can learn magic from all practices, but not everything, as well as equipped weapons and armor that most mages can't. But they never really excel at anything. The summoner gets 6 summons, each with their own element. This can be useful, but there isn't really a reason to use a summoner over a black mage, seeing as the black mage can get multiple versions of each elemental spell, allowing it to be viable through more of the game. And speak of the devil, next is the black mage. Like I said, the black mage is a full offensive magic caster who learns scaling versions of the 4 elements. This job is as useful as glass cannons get, but its versatility isn't outweighed by its frailty. The hunter class is a decent long-range melee class that can take the positives of bows while negating the negatives, i.e. accuracy. That wouldn't be amazing, except that the hunter also has the X-Fight ability, which is very useful for handing out damage. And the final member of the upper mid tier is the Dragoon. The Dragoon is a great early party class that slowly loses its usefulness as time goes on. The jump command is slow and can only be useful in a handful of situations, but the Dragoon armor, as always, is god tier. The top tier. There are a lot of classes in the top tier. As is consistent with most RPGs of the era, Final Fantasy V is a pretty broken game. That being said, we'll find many jobs that are broken on the top tier. Let's start with the Blue Mage. The Blue Mage can learn spells and attacks from enemies with the help of the Beastmaster. This really is the reason the Blue Mage is in the top tier. It's a great class for any playthrough. Next up is the Knight. The Knight is the most basic class of Final Fantasy. High attack combined with strong equipment and bulky HP places this job undisputedly in the top tier. Next is the Cannoneer. The Cannoneer is a harder class to place. The randomness of some attacks make it less consistent of a fighter, but the chemist-like ability to create cannonballs can be used for insane effects. The Mystic Knight takes all the best bits of the Knight class and the Black Mage class and blends them together into a turban-wearing beast. The ability to imbue your weapons with magic makes this job a damage-dealing machine. Speaking of damage-dealing machines, the Gladiator is a pure melee class that can hand out some of the heaviest and earliest damage in the game. This combined with a wide variety of equipment, the ability to do 9,999 damage with Finisher, and attacking from the back row set the Gladiator up for a win. The final member of the top tier is the Time Mage, which is your best support and debuffer in the game. There's a spell for every situation. Learning Meteor towards the end of the game also gives the Time Mage a decent damage-dealing attack as well. This is probably a must for any optimal party. The God tier. The God tier has 4 jobs, all of which make up the best and most broken classes in the game. First up is the Ninja. The Ninja class is fast and can potentially destroy every enemy. The definition of glass cannon, this job has low HP and can't take hits, but if you're looking for an all-out dual-wielding offensive class, look no further. Next is the Chemist. The Chemist may very well be the most broken class in the game. The mix and drink abilities must have been severely overlooked at Squaresoft. If you know how to use this class correctly, it is easily the best job to pick. Next is the Samurai. This class is god tier only if equipped with Masamune and its high crit and first strike ability. The Samurai is the mob clear of mob clears when it comes to the slash ability. The final job on the list and the top of the god tier is Freelancer, or the bear class. Yes, the job you start with is the best in the end. Why do you ask? Well, it can eventually become a hybrid of all the classes with the ability to equip all endgame equipment and negate negative effects of most abilities. This takes time, patience, and, well, a lot of time. But if you master every class this guy, along with the Mimic class, break the game completely. Today we will be examining the many characters of Final Fantasy VI. An untouchable classic, Final Fantasy VI is also known for having the largest playable cast of any title in the series. There are 14 playable characters, including 2 hidden ones that we will be looking at. Now, there are many different ways of playing this game. Stat building is highly customizable with the Esper system, which allows you to customize your party's roles to a certain extent. Now there will be a lot of discussion over this, but in the end, magic is easily the most overpowered ability in the game. Despite awesome skills like Shadow's throw ability or Sabin's blitz, magic just still outperforms them. So characters with naturally high magic stats are going to be placed higher on the list. With that being said, let's get started with the tier. First on the crap tier is Umaro, a hidden character. You get Umaro towards the end of the game, and by this time you have most likely built a winning strategy. Umaro is a character that is constantly under the Berserk status, meaning you don't control him at all. Being unable to equip Espers is just one more thing that puts this guy on the undisputed bottom of the list. The final character on the crap tier is Cyan. The beloved swordsman has a decent magic stat that could, with extensive grinding, be better, but he is insanely slow, and with that, his Bushido skills require a load time. So add these together and you have a slow and mostly useless character, but damn that mustache. Low tier. Strago's lores keep him just out of the crap tier. White Wind and Mighty Guard have always been useful Final Fantasy staples. He also has equipment that can be game-breaking as far as damage goes, but it's based off the amount of steps you take, and, well, there are a lot of steps to take. Setzer is pretty useless throughout the game. Endgame, he can jump up quite impressively with high damage attacks that require 0 MP. But again, this takes extensive grinding that is hard to do when that means using a mostly useless party member for most of the game. Mid-tier. Final Fantasy has always had awesome ninja characters. Yuffie, Edge, Ramza as a ninja, but Shadow stands as the undisputed best. He is just an all-around cool character, and all-around is a pretty good description of him in this game. Shadow's throw ability and natural strength and speed make him a decent character. His magic stat really is what brings him down from being a much better character. Gogo is the perfect definition of a mid-tier character. He is useful in the sense that he can have 3 of any character's ability. Mug, Bushido, Runic. He will also have a mix of characters' magic and can mimic the last action used. His stats can't be boosted, and so this makes him really a support accessory more than a party member. This is where the list is really going to lose some diehard fans. The last on the mid-tier is Edgar, a beloved character with a mixture of awesomely creative and powerful tools at his disposal. But by endgame, these are outperformed by magic. He has a good magic stat, and the ability to equip Dragoon relics, which makes him a decent offensive character. But he doesn't rise above the others in the party, pushing him just out of the top tier. Top tier. First on the top tier is the beloved Mog. Mog's greatest strength is that he is the only one who can equip the epic armor Snow Scarf. This gives him the ability to tank almost any attack. His well-rounded stats give him the opportunity to become anything your party requires. Blitz is one of the best character-specific abilities in the game. Sabin's endgame Blitz do insane damage. And not just this, but it's also a magic-based ability, which means that his magic stat adds to this. On top of all this, Sabin is pretty much useful throughout the entire game. In this YouTuber's humble opinion, Locke is the undisputed best character in Final Fantasy VI. His insistence that he's a treasure hunter, not a thief, as well as his romance with Celeste, make him god tier in my opinion. But looking at him objectively, Locke is a top tier candidate with the ability to use the best equipment in the game combined with the best relics makes his damage output amazing. He is simply a powerhouse with the added plus of Capture Mug. Next on the list is Celeste, a lesser version of Terra. Celeste can become one of the most powerful mages in the game, and like I said, magic simply comes out on top in Final Fantasy VI. In essence, She's best used as a mage tank with magic damage output and equipment that nullifies magic attacks. The final member of the top tier is by far the most controversial. Casual players might write off Realm as the worst character in the game. But by abusing the power of magic in this game, Realm, with her highest natural magic stat of any other character and her unique equipment, can make her unstoppable by endgame. God tier. Gao, like Realm, can be written off as a painfully useless character. His rage ability puts him into a berserk state, which is already pretty undesirable. But don't underestimate how broken this little guy can be. There's a rage for about everything in this game. It's a little time consuming, but this character, if used by a veteran, can take on every boss by himself. And the final member of the God tier is Terra. Terra, with endgame spells and morph, makes her utterly unstoppable. She simply destroys everything. So today we're going to celebrate my first tier list by remaking it. Yes, Final Fantasy VII was the first of the Who is Best series, and the channel has grown and evolved since then. Going back, I actually still agree with many of the placements, but unfortunately I was wrong on some specific information and also left out a game-breaking strat that the community has been adamant that I include. So today we'll be re-ranking the party members of Final Fantasy VII. Characters differ in a few ways, including base stats, limit breaks, weapons, and that's about it. With that in mind, there are major advantages to certain party members. So without further ado, I give you the revised tier. Aerith is still a tier character. It doesn't matter that she has the highest magic, spirit, and MP stat in the game, or that she has some of the most useful limit breaks. None of this matters since you can't use her for the second half of the game. If you think that she should be ranked higher, well then you are lost! The low tier. Yes, Cait Sith has moved up from the previous list. Many of the comments made some good points about his character. Next to Vincent, he has the third, technically second best magic stat in the game. His luck and spirit are also one of the highest as well. His limit break can be manageable and at the end of the day can instant kill bosses. I wouldn't recommend him as an endgame party member because he doesn't add to any broken strat, but he is still slightly viable for your party. The mid tier. Red 13 hasn't changed from the previous list. He is an all-around good character. He has the highest speed stat as well as average to above average stats in every category, his magic and luck stat being the lowest. He receives good weapons early in the story, and his limit breaks, though not the best when it comes to damage, can be extremely broken in the early game. Casting haste or hitting 9,999 damage before the end of Disc 1 is great, but it doesn't scale compared to other limits that hit multiple times. Again, Red 13 is perfect for newcomers. Tifa Lockhart. Tifa is the speedrun goddess. If you equip her with Power Soul and keep her HP in the yellow, her damage is doubled. Slap on Death Sentence and the Materia Death Blow and you can get her damage to 16 or 30 times its normal output. Now if this was a speedrun tier list, she'd place first, but it's not. As good as she is playing this game hastily, optimally she is a mid-tier member. Tifa's limit breaks take inputs and ultimately land somewhere in the middle when it comes to damage. Like Red 13, she is a perfect mid-game character. But also like Red 13, she loses her usefulness as you approach late game. Strength, speed, and luck are her highest stats, making her a critical hitting babe. The top tier. Yuffie may not be the damage-dealing beast that Tifa is. She may not have the well-rounded stats of Red 13 or the casting capabilities of Aerith. But what she lacks, she more than makes up for in breaking the game. Yuffie's ultimate weapon, Conformer, is key in farming stat-boosting items in the Gilneca ship. These items are important for the God tier and thus her ability cannot be ignored. Normally, the Morph Materia does little damage, but this ultimate weapon does full damage, making it easy to defeat enemies and turn them into items. Despite this, she isn't a terrible party member at all. Her speed and luck stat are among the highest and she has long-range weapons, which means she is at home in the back row. Also, her level 3 Limit Break is one of the best multi-hitting attacks in the game, and since it's level 3, it's much quicker to fill up the limit gauge. Next on the top tier is Cid Highwind. Cid might have some of the worst stats in the game, his MP, magic, spirit, and luck being the lowest of the party members. But much like Yuffie, he makes up for it in utility. Cid and Cloud are the only party members who have a triple growth weapon, and in order to break Final Fantasy VII, you have to level a lot of materia. He also has one of the best multi-hitting limit breaks next to Anger Max and Omni Slash. The final member of the top tier is Cloud Strife. Cloud is a required party member and has the best stats in the game. He is top 3 in HP, MP, Strength, Vitality, Magic, and Spirit. His lowest stat is Luck, which even then, he's still average. Cloud also gains the best weapons in the game with double and 1 triple growth weapon. He has high damaging limit breaks culminating in a 15-hit Omni Slash, and would probably be a part of your optimal in-game team even if you had a choice. The God tier. Here's the moment you all been waiting for. The 2 members of the God tier are Barrett Wallace and Vincent Valentine. They rank here because of a ridiculous glitch in the game that allows them to break the damage limit. This glitch is called the Overflow glitch, and this is how it works.
In 30-bit operation systems, integer numbers are encoded in 4 bytes. In particular, for signed integers, the OS employs the so-called 2's compliant comparison in 2's compliant if leftmost is negative weighted, and the most of all the values positive value. Given a generic n bit of 2's compliant representative, every bit represents a 2, starting from 2-0 to 2-9. The corresponding value in base 10 is calculated by adding all of those powers to each one wave. The almost sort of multiplier is such a bit. Working with the 2's complement represent the largest signed positive number, which can be represented in the n bit, is the one starting with the its binary represented 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Since the leftmost bit is 0 and all the other bits are 1s, the value of the number above is the sum of the 2 and the 2 point negative 2, and represent the following explanation: e equal to given an integer k, the sum of all powers of 2 with the exponent in the range of 0k, 1 is 2k, and above k is 1, and therefore, after calculating the sum, the result base in 10 is 0, which is the upper bound for 32-bit signed integers. Similarly, the largest negative number which can be represented in n-bits is 1 or smaller than the lower bound, and overflow occurs in the software and exists in overflow behaviors.
Okay, so for anyone who didn't catch all that, the Overflow breaks the damage calculator, thus causing instant death to every enemy in the game except for Ruby Weapon. To achieve this glitch, you need to exploit Vincent and Barrett's ultimate weapons. Vincent's is harder since you have to defeat about 65,536 enemies with a death blow. There are spots in the game where you can have a random encounter of 6 to 7 enemies, and this has been used to reach Overflow, but it is going to take about 200 to 300 in-game hours. Barrett's is a little easier to achieve. The damage on missing score scales according to AP on the materia attached to it. So if you attach 8 Mastered Knights of the Round materia with hero drinks and max stats, you will obtain Overflow. Easy, right? And today I am finally getting to one of my most requested Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy VIII. To be honest, I have avoided this one for a very long time. It's a beloved entry, and frankly, Final Fantasy VIII fans scare me. Now, in case some of you out there might think I'm being biased, I have no skin in this game. I've 100% completed Final Fantasy VIII and will probably never play it again because I didn't really enjoy it. That isn't a jab at anyone who loves this game, but more to ensure that tier placement is made completely off of research and experience. No favorites here. I've decided that since summons play a bigger role in this game than most others, the junctioning system being one of the more broken aspects of Final Fantasy VIII, I've decided to add them into this list as well. Now, Final Fantasy VIII is probably the second most breakable Final Fantasy in the series. It still has nothing on Final Fantasy II, but players have found ridiculous ways to master this game. I'm going to try to consider everything out there, but I'm sure I'll have missed game-breaking strategies in the end. Don't hate me. We will be examining the 6 playable characters and 16 junctionable summons of Final Fantasy VIII. I'll be considering stats, limit breaks, and all-around usefulness of the cast, while also looking at summon skills, abilities, junctions, and I guess how powerful they are in battle, though that is pretty much an afterthought in this game. Now, without further ado, I give you the tier. The only characters that belong in the tier are the non-junctionable summons. They are a novelty, nothing more, and have barely any usefulness for the majority of the game. The low tier. First up in the low tier is Carbuncle. This summon starts out okay and moves to pretty much useless towards the middle of the game. Junctioning HP and Vitality as well as ability times 3 and counter can be useful early on, but not for very long. Next up is Pandemona. Let's be honest, Wind Element just isn't that good. this guy can't even refine wind magic, which is a negative. He can up your speed earlier than most other summons, but overall there isn't much reason to use him. Next is Siren. Oh, nope, not that Siren. There we go. Siren is not going to be a great summon to use in battle. But seeing as that isn't the most important part of any summon, she is a decent junctioner. The biggest reason to use her is her magic bonus ability, which permanently increases magic stat upon level up. The brothers can be very useful in early game and give you a big advantage, but that is quickly outpaced by other summons later on. Tonberry functions more as a utility summon than anything else. With his ability, you can shop from the main menu, alter the levels of your enemies, and much more. Cactuar has a great attack in 10,000 needles, though if played right, damage output should exceed this easily by late game. He also learns all of the permanent stat boost skills as well. Waiting to grind out levels for this guy is always a smart choice. Depending on playstyle, Cerberus can actually be an extremely useful summon for battle. It grants double cast, which can have some insane ramifications. It also learns auto haste and some speed boosting abilities. The final member low tier and first party member is Selphie. Now I want to make an important distinction. This is Selphie considered without the limit break, the end. From reading the forums, this is a controversial thing to consider, so I will have Selphie ranked with and without the end. Selphie is a decent member of the party, though she brings little to it. She's probably one of the worst choices for late game party members. The mid-tier. The mid-tier is where we are really going to move into controversial ground, though the summons should be pretty straightforward. First, we have Alexander. He pretty much boosts healing and item effectiveness. His med ability is also required to obtain Doom Train, which is a much better summon. Next is Leviathan. Leviathan is a useful summon with skills like Recover, but doesn't stand out from the crowd. Final Fantasy VIII Shiva is my second favorite of the series, next to Final Fantasy XV's criminally underused summon. That being said, Shiva is one of the first summons you get and can be useful from beginning to end. She does not bring any substantial value over other summons, but she doesn't lose her usefulness as time goes on. Next, we have Quetzalcoatl. One of the first summons you obtain, Quetzalcoatl gives you the Card and Refine abilities, which are pivotal in setting up your endgame. Now, moving into mid-tier playable characters, we start with Quistis. Quistis' blue magic is useful for random battles. Degenerator and Bad Breath go a long way. But in a game where limit breaks ultimately define you, she's in the middle of the bunch. The final member of the mid-tier is Irvine. I know I'm opening a whole can of worms here, but when considered, the damage his pulse ammo can put out is substantial, but overall shadowed by those in the top tier. The top tier. First on the top tier is the Dragon King himself, Bahamut. Bahamut can refine the best magic in the game as well as give you access to the best stat boosting skills available. Also, his attack isn't too shabby. Next on the top tier is Doom Train. Possibly the most useful attack of the bunch, Doom Train dishes out a variety of negative status effects which most enemies in the game will not have a resistance to. He can also create forbidden medicine like the Hero Trials, which is the most broken item to ever exist, making all party members invincible for the remainder of the battle. Our second to last summon on the top tier is Diablos. Because of the weird leveling of enemies, Diablos' ability to have and eliminate random encounters, as well as the hugely useful Mug ability, put him here at the top. The final summon of the top tier is Eden. I mentioned that this game is a broken mess. If it weren't for that, Eden would be God tier. She can devour enemies for permanent stat boosts, teach GF skills, and her summons can break the damage limit. But you get Eden late. She takes an insane amount of experience to level up, and because of limit breaks, there isn't a reason to fully utilize everything she brings to the table. But her usefulness cannot be denied. Now let's move on to the party members of the top tier. First up on the top tier is Squall. Squall is a tyrant. Lionheart is an insane finisher, and if done right, you can increase the chance of him performing this attack by about 25%. If this weren't random, Squall's placement on this list would be another story. The final member of the top tier is Rinoa. Rinoa is a massive damage dealer. Max out her speed, and Wishing Star can do around 200,000 damage. Angelo Assist plus Invincible Moon are a killer combination, making her one of the more versatile characters in the game. More importantly, she fires her dog from her arm, which is ridiculous. Also, there's a very complicated but broken way of exploiting Angel Wings for game-breaking damage. The God Tier. Here it is, the top contenders of an already broken game. I want to reiterate how hard it is to make a list of Final Fantasy VIII. Okay, let's just put Selphie's the end here. It's random, yes, but much more doable than, let's say, Kate Sith's Limit. It can instantly kill any boss in the game, so take it or leave it, she's either in the low tier or the God tier. The final member of the God tier is Zell. Zell's Limit Break can be abused to do over 1,000,000 damage, and no, I'm not kidding. If you have fast reflexes, then spamming his Punch Rush, Heal Drop, and Booyah limits just utterly break the game completely.
Today we'll be looking at the masterpiece that is Final Fantasy IX. In my opinion, this game was the epitome of everything Final Fantasy and marked a shift for the series going forward from its fantasy roots. Not to say that what came after was bad, but never again will we see charm like this. We will be looking at the different party members of this game and rating them. This will be based off of optimal late game, like always. There are a lot of variables to each character. Unlike Final Fantasy VII and VIII, which gave you characters that were highly customizable, Final Fantasy IX again goes back to its roots of healers, thieves, and knights. We will be considering skills, trance skills, stats, and unique class abilities. Now, without further ado, let's begin with tier. Garnet, aka Dagger, is the beautiful daughter of Queen Braun. I love her design and may or may not have had a crush on her as a teenager. That being said, she is just an awful party member. I mean, we are talking on par with Kate Sith as far as crappy party members in the series go. She is your white mage and summoner. Not only is she practically useless throughout the game, there is an entire section where she is permanently mute and can't use magic. Yeah. But by the end, her best summon can't even do as much damage as Amaranth's regular attack. Not just that, but the summon animation is almost as long as Knights of the Round Table. Almost. Oh, did I also mention that she cannot learn Holy? I love you, Dagger, but you earned your place here. Low tier. Steiner is a beast, but being a beast just isn't good enough. If this game didn't have a very strict 9,999 damage limit, then he could potentially be the best damage dealer in the game. But seeing as there are so many easier ways to deal damage by endgame, this guy is just useless. His magic sword requires him and Vivi to be in the party together. Spoiler, both are in the low tier. And it uses Vivi's MP. Steiner gets other great attacks like Shock and Clim Hazard, but he has the lowest MP stat in the game and will run out very quickly. Next in the low tier is Vivi. I know, no one saw that coming. Vivi is great, don't get me wrong, but even with such a high MP pool, his later spells just drain it. There is a strategy where you can reflect magic off of your party members and even reflect ×2, but again, this is a lot of work in order to deal that 9,999 damage cap. He's not bad, but there are just way better choices out there. Mid-tier. Aiko may be one of the more controversial placements on this list. Some will argue that she should be higher. Having a dedicated healer in the party can be useful, but if you prepare with the right strategy, you shouldn't need one. Aiko has summons that deal more with support than damage. Carbuncle, which casts Reflect, and Phoenix, which can resurrect an entire party plus do fire damage, can be very useful. She also learns Holy, which can be used to make her a healer/DPS. Double White Magic is also awesome. but contingent on trance. Next is Zidane. Zidane is pretty much a required character through most of the game, including the ending. But he is also a fast character with the ability to steal. Steal enough in the game, and you will have a guaranteed 9,999 damaged attack. When it comes to late game, this, counter, and Soul Blade are about all he's useful for. Just a plain old DPS. Top tier. Freya is a slightly better version of Zidane. She's more tankier and has Dragon Quest, which is a fairly easy way of doing a guaranteed 9,999 attack, and has a low MP cost. She also gets Rise Wind, which casts Regain, as well as can learn the counter ability. Also, she's a Rat Lady Dragoon Knight wielding a badass spear. What's not to like here? Final member of the high tier is Amarant. Amarant, Amarante, Mr. Coral, whatever you want to call him. Amarant does everything. He can hit with massive damage, reaching that 9,999 threshold with his basic attack. He can also cause damage with his throw ability, albeit a little pricey chucking high-level weapons. No Mercy can guarantee high-level damage, but he doesn't stop there. Amarant can also heal both HP and MP, cast Regain, and revive fallen party members. During trance, his flare ability can target all. This guy is master of everything. Well, almost. There is one character that blows him out of the water. God tier. He, she, but we're going to go with she, is a beast. It'll take a while, but if you put in the time, this character can be epically strong. First, catch 100 frogs to get a guaranteed 9,999 attack with Frog Drop. Then devour enemies to gain all the blue magic abilities. These include Mighty Guard, which casts Shell and Protect on all party members, Angel Snack, which casts Remedy on all party members, Auto Life, which casts Auto Life on all party members, Bad Breath, which casts pretty much every status ailment on the enemy, and White Wind, which can heal the entire party. Limit Glove can also be an overpowered move. If you are looking for an epic playthrough, don't leave this character behind. Alright, so as far as the optimal party goes, it depends on how safe you want to be. Using Zidane, Freya, Amarant, and Quina makes an epic party of damage dealers, with Amarant, Freya, and Quina all taking on the minor role of healing the party. If not, switch out Amarant for Aiko and have her focus on healing the party. Freya, Zidane, and Quina should focus on strict damage to the enemy. Final Fantasy X was a huge departure from previous games. It was the first to have full voice acting, no world map, and a sequel. But none of that matters, because today we're asking ourselves which party members are best in Final Fantasy X. Oh, and don't forget to stick around till the end, where we will reveal the best party for your playthrough. Now, without further ado, I give you the tier. Let's start this off with a good old controversy. Kimahri is an interesting case. To the casual gamer, he's complete garbage. To the serious one, he's too much work to make good. To the ultra god tier Final Fantasy X waifu +1 ultra maniac, he's God's gift to man. So in order to please everyone, we'll meet in the middle and put him in tier. Sure, Kimahri can be strong, but good hell, it just takes so much work and resources. Work and resources that could be put to better use with others on this list. I love his design, and the role he plays in the story is good, if a little unexplored, but altogether, better to just ignore him for other party members.
Sad.
The low tier. Lulu doesn't seem to fit in this game. She wears gothic leathers and is equipped with the biggest set of tatas in the series. Oh. She is also a pure black mage, and if you watched any of my other Final Fantasy tier lists, you will know that black mages tend to be overpowered in the opening hours of the game and slowly become irrelevant in the late game. See Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. Nothing has changed here. Once Yuna can jump onto Lulu's sphere grid and pick up spells like Flare, Lulu becomes pretty much obsolete. Her Onion Knight can keep her relevant with its MP capabilities, but you have to dodge lightning, and that sucks. The mid-tier. A casual player coming across this list will be surprised to find Auron in the mid-tier. He feels like he should be the most overpowered party member in the game, what with his damage output and wicked-looking swords. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. Auron is strong, and if you aren't aware of ways to break the game, he may very well be the strongest character in your party. He can put out a ton of damage, but his speed mitigates any gain from this. Comparing any of his skills to Tidus's quick hit ability will quickly show his shortcomings. Tidus can attack multiple turns for every one of Auron's. He isn't a bad character, but you're not going to break the game with him around. The top tier. We're doing pretty good so far. 3 characters in and we're already at the top tier. And we're going to start off with the White Mage Summoner Yuna. Yuna has the highest magic stat in the game, but until Holy or you switch her position on the sphere grid, she has no ability to use offensive magic. Gaining her black magic turns her into the best mage in the game. But her usefulness doesn't stop there. Yuna is also the only character who can summon. This is pretty much a free attack as it saves your other characters from taking damage. Get the best summons in the game like the Mega Sisters, Anima, or Yojimbo, and you have one of the strongest non-game breaking characters in the game. Speaking of game breaking, let's move into the final member of the top tier. The main protagonist of the story, Tidus, or Tidus. Oh, I'm gonna hear flack for this. However you pronounce it. Tidus is skirting the line between top tier and god tier. He gets quick hit early on in the game, which is one of the most useful skills, and can pretty much break the game when used right. He has multiple hit overdrives and is useful from beginning to end. The God tier. There are 2 party members in the God tier, and both can be used to pretty much break any fight. The first is the Albed girl, Riku. Riku is, no contest, the most useful party member. Her overdrive can deal out insane damage as well as cast Hyper Mighty Guard and Ultra Null All on the entire party. On top of this, she can beat out Yuna in the healing department with her Albed potions. Oh, and did I mention she can steal the most important items in the game as well? Really, anyone who doesn't use her is missing out on a huge portion of the game. And the final member of the God tier and top of this list is the Dork Wakka. He's here because of his speed, long-range attack ability, and most importantly, his overdrive attack reels. Attack reels can hit around 12 times and does the most damage of any other character in the game. That's it. Riku and Tidus are more useful in the long run, but Wakka just can't be ignored when comparing his battle abilities to anyone else. Now, as for the optimal team, really you should focus on 4 characters. Your team until finding Riku is going to be Tidus, Yuna, and Lulu. You want to be able to switch Yuna over to Lulu's sphere grid, so leveling her up a bit is key. Switch in Wakka to make sure he is leveling as well. Once you get Riku, use Tidus, Riku, and Wakka for the majority of the game, switching in Yuna for healing and summoning.
Wait, what's going on? Oh no. Oh, please. No. Oh no. Please, just kill me now. You know what happened to you? Last time I saw you... Oh, please. No. Square. What did you... Holy crap, Riku is hot. Okay, so today we're looking at the dress spheres of Final Fantasy X-2. Yes, this game is silly, but much like Final Fantasy XIII, the battle system carried me through it. There are 14, 15 different dress spheres or jobs in this game. There are also just 3 party members, Yuna, Riku, and Pain. Each of these party members can have access to a certain amount of dress spheres according to which garment grid they are wearing.
By equipping every dress sphere on your grid in one battle, the girls have access to a special dress sphere that is very powerful. Abilities and auto skills can cross over into other dress spheres, which can... Okay, let's just say it is very complicated. It's not hard to rate the dress spheres alone, but when considered with every tactic in the game, this list gets, well, complicated. But that's what we do here, so join us as we dive into the question, which dress sphere is best? The tier. Festival Goer was a dress sphere added in the international version. It's the Black Mage Light with an amazing twist. It sucks. Seriously, middling stats with complete crap tier skills make this dress sphere a steaming turd of a job. I highly recommend ignoring it like most players. You gain this dress sphere from talking to Brother after the opening sequence of the game. The final member of the tier is the Trainer. There is absolutely no reason to use this class other than it ups the difficulty of the whole game, as it is utterly useless. This sphere is obtained from speaking with Kimari and the Ronzos, answering the correct answers to their concerns. The low tier. The Warrior is a basic class that you start out with at the beginning of the game. Early game, this class is great for both attack and defense. Sentinel especially is useful for tanking attacks. I especially like the look of this one, though it will quickly be replaced by the Samurai, Dark Knight, Psychic, and Berserk classes. The Gunner is destructive depending on what version you are using. The catnip glitch in the original game made this class one of the highest damaging dealing dress spheres in the game, but it has been nerfed in subsequent versions. Overall, it's a decent class worth a try, but nothing compared to what comes after it. This is another dress sphere you start with at the beginning of the game. The mid tier. The Black Mage is pretty much exactly what you would expect. For the basic needs of the story, this class stays relevant throughout, though endgame it's going to be a very mediocre class when it comes to damage and survivability. You gain this dress sphere from Mount Gagazet in Chapter 1. The Samurai is my favorite looking dress sphere for Riku and overall a beast of a class. It's extremely versatile with damage attacks, buffs, and even self-heal spells. There are other physical damage classes you will gain that outpace it, but like the Black Mage, it's still useful throughout. You gain this dress sphere from Kilika Temple in Chapter 3. The Thief is a sexy beast of a class. First Strike lets you switch dress spheres immediately and is key in bringing out your special dress sphere as soon as possible. Its usefulness is much like Riku's in the original Final Fantasy X. It can be used to steal the best items in the game and give your team an insane advantage in late game. You start the game with this dress sphere. The Songstress is another sphere you gain in the opening hours of the game. It is horrible in battle when it comes to attack and defense, but undeniably amazing when it comes to support. Buffing party members and debuffing enemies is the name of the game when it comes to Songstress. It's a useful one to have in your back pocket for sure. The top tier. The White Mage is a must-have for your party. I recommend it for Yuna. This class is a magic damage tank that can eventually spam Holy for some decent damage as well. Oh, and don't forget its healing capacity, which is off the charts. You get this class by clearing the events in VIII in Chapter 1. The Alchemist is amazing for most of the game. It takes what made Riku broken in the first game and just dishes more on top of it. The Alchemist is your best early game healer, and if paired with 2 Dark Knights, makes for one of the best party builds other than the obvious one. Late game, the mix ability becomes king as the Alchemist can use Miracle Drink to just break the game completely. You get this dress sphere from clearing the fiends in the monster arena in the Calm Lands. The Gun Mage, better known as the Blue Mage, can potentially be your best support class period. This class can learn enemy skills. Once you have obtained Mighty Guard, White Wind, Heaven's Cataract, and Annihilator, you have one of the best classes in the game. You get this class from helping Tobli. The final member of the top tier is the Berserker, which is just badass. From its looks to its attacks, these gals are just beasts. Evade and counter alone drives this class to the top tier, but add an ability to double HP and dispel negative elements along with the signature skill Berserk, and you can just let the job run wild. You get this dress sphere from clearing out the fiends in Makalania Travel Agency. The God tier. Lady Luck is your super boss killer / number 1 support class when it comes to leveling and guild grinding. Manipulating the quote-unquote random abilities just push this gal over the edge. The crit damage alone this class produces is just phenomenal. It takes practice and research to figure out how to use this class right, but it is well worth it. Defeat Shinra in a game of Sphere Break to gain this class. The Dark Knight makes this game boring. It's so powerful and straightforward that you'll find yourself on auto drive once you gain it. This class sacrifices HP to do damage, but with the right support, this is no problem. It can hit single and multiple targets and basically just cream all the enemies. It's also nearly impossible to kill with its insane defense stats. The Dark Knight is a must for an endgame team, period. The final member of the God tier is the Psychic. Not only is their outfits amazing, but the Psychic is impossible to kill. This is a God tier class if one ever existed. Amazing stats, skills, auto abilities, and mobility make this class the best in the game. Well, almost the best, but take out the obvious and this is a must-have. The crazy thing is, all you have to do to obtain it is clear the standard Fiend Cup, so you can get it from the very beginning. Absolutely insane. And that's my list. I hope... What? Oh, yeah, I missed a sphere. Right. Yeah, I suppose I'll talk about it. I'm gonna need another tier. The Broken tier. The Mascot. Is this a surprise? Though a late game class, the Mascot is leagues ahead of anything else that comes before it. Each one is different dependent on the character. Yuna's is a healing focused class with Warrior and Dark Knight abilities to accompany it. Riku's is probably the worst of the three, though still far better than anything else in the game. It is pretty much built to be the jack of all trades with a focus on support and AoT damage. Pain's Mascot is the best dress sphere in the game. There's no debate. Samurai and Black Mage abilities with a focus on debuffs and single target damage. Yeah, she's the queen. Final Fantasy XII originally came out on the PlayStation 2, but when it was ported over to America, and Europe I think, the game was dumbed down for us stupid Yankees. Instead of having jobs with specific abilities, we were given a wide open skill board that allowed you to craft immensely broken characters. Now, as fun as that may sound, it lost a tactical flair that the newest version of the game, Zodiac Age, has. Zodiac Age brought Japan's version of Final Fantasy XII to the States, and with it came the job system. In this game, each player character can be assigned a job or class. Later in the story, you can assign 2, allowing for interesting hybrids. When considering jobs, we'll be looking at skills, weapons, stats, whether they have access to the immensely important break techniques, ability to equip Genji gloves, and finally access to the Swift license. Now, with this tier list, I'm going to first start by quickly rating the individual characters on their stats and how they work with different classes. After that, we will jump into our tier list of each individual class, followed by the most god tier combinations available to you in Final Fantasy XII. So let's buckle up and get started. There are 6 available characters in this game. Now, the differences between characters are so small that it's not worth making a tier list necessarily, but it is worth noting who are incrementally better. The worst party member is unfortunately Fran. She has the worst stats in the game and probably functions best as a support mage. Next is the dashing sky pirate Balthier. Balthier is best built as a physical party member but is outclassed by Bosch and Vaughn. Then we have Pinello, who is your best mage overall, but lacks in a lot of other stat pools. The next 3 characters are the best in the game, and if you're trying to optimize your party, you should probably use them. Those are Bosch, Ash, and finally the effeminate Vaughn. You just can't ignore the stats of these 3. Now with that out of the way, let's dive into the tier. Mechanists are by far the worst class to choose in this game. The greatest advantage they give is their weapon of choice. Guns don't factor a character's stats into its regular attack. Instead, the power of the weapon is based off of the equipment itself. The advantage of this is that a white mage mechanist mix could potentially do decent regular attack damage while healing your party. The fact that the mechanist has no access to any of the breaks techniques solidifies its position in the tier. The low tier. First up on the low tier is the Ulan. The Ulan is the Dragoon Knight. They use spears, which have one of the longest attack animations ever. Also, the Ulan doesn't pair up as well with other jobs, making it less than ideal class for your character. What keeps the Ulan out of the tier is that it has access to the break spells Expose and Wither. Next on the low tier is the Archer. This class's biggest downfall is that, like the Ulan, there are classes that are similar while bringing much more to the table. Archers have access to the 3x swiftness and pairs well with the Red Mage, which makes them decent, but pairing a Black Mage with a Red Mage is almost always the better option. The final member of the low tier is the Time Battle Mage. This is a shame, as the Time Mage has always been one of my favorite magic-based classes in the Final Fantasy universe. That being said, it's not at all a bad job. Haste and slow are always useful and can turn the tide of battle. Not just that, but Time Mages have access to the 3x swiftness. But here's the deal. When by itself, the Time Mage just doesn't cut it as a high-tier class. Its greatest usefulness is when it is paired with another class, specifically a Knight or Ulan, since it will help boost these slower classes and give their minimal magic abilities a bit of a bite. I think there's an argument for placing this job higher, but for now, they cap off the low tier. The mid tier. First on the mid tier is the Monk. The Monk is a great class that has the highest strength stat in the game, access to white magic spells, and Expose and Wither break techniques. Some god tier combinations include the Monk for those very reasons. But like the Time Mage, this class is really only useful when paired with the Bushi or Black Mage classes. By itself, it's a run-of-the-mill job at best. Next is the Red Battle Mage. Red Mages are almost always in the mid tier. I think this is by design. Red Mage is a jack of all trades when it comes to magic and can give other classes access to some important skills well paired. But again, and I feel like this is the theme of this tier, this class's full potential is only realized when paired with another. The final member of the mid tier is the Black Mage. A Black Mage is your magic DPS. Access to the best attack spells in the game, along with some status inflicting ones, give this class a massive edge. Black Mages also pair well with almost any other class, be it White Mage, Time Mage, Monk, or Samurai. Are physical attackers overall slightly better? Yes, but that doesn't mean this job isn't worth checking out. The top tier. Here it is, the cream of the crop. The top tier is full of must-have classes that are almost required for an optimal playthrough. And we start with the Paladin. The Paladin has the second highest strength, access to some great weapons and armor, some white magic spells, and, well, probably makes one of the best jobs to pair with, period. If you can offset its weaknesses with another class, the Paladin is a beast. Next is the White Mage. You're going to need a dedicated healer in your 3-man party. Some strategies mix this up, making job combinations that give everyone a little bit of healing, aka the Monk or Knight. You can do that, or you can just choose a White Mage that has access to every white magic spell. Pair this job with the Shikari or Mechanist, and you may very well have one of the best White Mages in any Final Fantasy game. The final member of the top tier is the Bushi or Samurai. The Samurai uses katanas, which can be one of the highest dealing weapons in the game. They're fast, strong, and have a high magic stat. No other class better offsets the weaknesses of others. Pair with Knight, Foebreaker, Shikari, or Monk, and you'll have a devastating party member. The God tier. Two classes in Final Fantasy XII Zodiac Age have been used to break the game. The first of which is the Foebreaker. The Foebreaker has access to all 4 break techniques. This makes all of the hardest boss battles much easier. The Foebreaker is combined to make the best job combo in the game, which we will be discussing shortly. The final member of the God tier and top of this list is the Shikari or Hunter class. The Hunter class is key in defeating the strongest boss in the game, Yezmat. Through this class, you can equip dark accessories as well as equip weapons with dark elemental attacks. On top of this, the Shikari can equip Genji gloves and ninja swords, which is the strongest accessory and weapons in the game. If that wasn't enough, you also have access to swiftness times 3. Overall, there is no downside to this class. Now I'm going to put the best job combinations in order, meaning that I'll start with the least god tier to what I think is the best possible combination. All of these combos are considered the best in the game though. First, we have the Paladin Time Mage. Time Mage gives the slow knight 3 times swiftness, a ranged weapon, and some decent magic power. This is an optimal support class. Next is the Black Mage Red Mage combo. The Red Mage gets the most powerful elemental spell in the game, Ardor. With the Black Mage's help, this combo lets you use the Flame Staff to boost Ardor to 50%. Oil plus Ardor plus Flame Staff makes the highest damaging spell in the game. Next is the Bushi Paladin combo. Samurai's katanas do damage based on both strength and magic. Samurai has very high magic power, and the Knight has excellent strength, which together increase the katana's damage output to incredible levels. This also allows you to equip heavy armor. On top of this, with the Samurai's high magic stats, the Knight's white magic becomes immensely more useful. Overall, this is probably the best meshing combo in the game. Let's move on to the Shikari White Mage combo. This is the ultimate combination of evasion tank and healer. With high HP, shields, and one of the best weapons in the game, the main gouge, which gives you 50 evasion. On top of this, all of the white magic spells, this combo will carry your team. Next up is the best magic DPS setup, the Black Mage Monk combo. The Monk gives your Black Mage 3 times swiftness, tons of HP, strength, and access to white magic. There is nothing to not like here. If Hunter White Mage is the best magic healer combo, Black Mage and Monk is the best magic damage dealing combo. Second to the top is the Shikari Bushi combo, which might as well be dubbed the Yuzmak Killer. This is the only combination that allows for Genji Gloves, plus the Yagyu Dark Blade, and the Black Robes, which boost dark damage by 50%. These 3 combined would cut the time it takes to kill Yuzmet, at worst, in half. If you're planning on taking out the endgame baddie, this is hands down your best option. The final combo, and uncontested best class combo in the game, is the Hunter Breaker combo. Like I said before, Hunter's ninja swords are one of the best weapons in the game, and paired with the Genji gloves make you a damage dealing god. This combination gives you 3 times swiftness, a ranged weapon and hand bombs, all 4 breaks, Genji gear, high strength, and HP, and ninja swords.
Final Fantasy XIII. Do we still hate this game? I can't quite tell anymore. It felt like most people liked it when it came out. Then like 5 years later, it was the worst game ever. Now it's, I don't know, maybe bad? I'm not sure. Here's hoping Square publishes a remastered trilogy so we can start the conversation up once more. For me personally though, it's a pretty bad game that has an almost perfect battle system that you really can't experience till the final few hours. But has an epic female protagonist that absolutely kicks ass. And this guy here. But a chocobo lives in the stereotypical depiction of a black man's afro, and that's cool. Alright, enough dicking around. Today we're making a tier list of every character's paradigm shift and figuring out which is best. Paradigms are classes with 6 variations. You have the physical attacking commando, the magic wielding ravager, the defensive sentinel, the healing medic, the debuffing saboteur, and my personal favorite, the buffing synergist. I mentioned that Final Fantasy XIII's battle system is near perfect, and I stand by that, mainly because of the stagger mechanic. You see, every enemy has a large amount of HP, and regular physical attacks won't do much until they're staggered. A standard battle would start with a Ravager hitting the enemy with magic while a Sentinel draws their attacks, and a Synergist buffs the party. Once the enemy is staggered, you might switch all 3 characters to the Commando paradigm in order to lay down a boatload of damage. Either way, every class is useful and balanced, but not every character is useful in it. Oh, I should probably mention that there are 6 party members in this game. With 6 paradigms each, that means that you have a total of 36 builds, with an incredible assortment of party combinations to choose from. Again, once you've progressed through most of the game. Anyway, I think I've talked enough. Let's get started with the shit here. Vanille, as a synergist, lacks this paradigm's most important spell, Haste, and what other spells she has are situational at best. Due to Vanille's incredibly slow attack animation and terrible strength, she makes for one of the worst commandos in the game.
Saz is the worst character in Final Fantasy XIII due to terrible stats and the slowest attack animations. He really only does one paradigm well, and we'll get there later, but he may be one of the worst saboteurs in the game, lacking most important spells. Saz is also a terrible medic, with the same spells as Snow but a lower magic stat and again, terribly slow animations. Because Saz doesn't have Reprieve and Metaguard, he may also be the worst Sentinel in the game. Hope is also a terrible Sentinel with the same unique build as Lightning, but he sucks at it. Lightning, unfortunately, makes it to our tier as a saboteur. This is mainly due to lacking any and all useful skills and being outclassed by all other characters. The final member of the tier is Fang as a medic. She has a few good skills, but absolutely no magic stat to back them up. The low tier. Hope holds up as a commando only against enemies weak to magic, as his boomerangs suck. But with Ruin, he does alright. Saz makes a low tier commando due to his speed and terrible stats and lack of a launch attack. That being said, his blitz can be effective in certain situations. Lightning is your early game medic, but by the end game, she'll be outshined by so many others. Snow makes his first appearance on this list with his Synergist class, which is passable. Alright, because this list is pretty big, we're going to break up the mid-tier into two parts, so let's get started with the lower mid-tier. Surprising as it is, Vanille actually makes a decent Sentinel as she has both better HP and defense than Hope, and also gains the Reprieve spell, which helps in late game battles. Fang isn't the first you think of when it comes to the Synergist class, but if you're willing to put in the time, she isn't too bad. That is if you're controlling her. If not, her AI sucks. If the enemy is weak to Daze, then Snow's Saboteur can be almost god tier, as it's the single best Daze spammer in the game. If not, then he's not worth having around. Snow's medic is also pretty decent, as he has both okayish magic and incredible defense and HP, making him the tankiest healer in the game. The final member of the lower mid tier is Lightning's Sentinel. Unlike all the characters, she is built as an evasion tank. This makes her situationally useful. Alright, let's move on to the upper mid tier. Our first Ravager appears on this list, as it's one of the most useful and game-breaking classes in the game, and Fang does this paradigm fairly well, as it's less about the magic stat and magic damage, and more about chaining, and Fang is one of the best, though you unlock this paradigm so late, and it takes so much work that you might just pass on it. Vanille's Ravager is unfortunately plagued by her terrible speed and lack of vigor, though her magic stat tries to make up for that. Unfortunately, she's one of the worst chainers due to these reasons. Hope makes an average saboteur, as he is best suited to debuffing mobs. The glaring issue is when he goes up against bosses and lacks single target spells, making him less than ideal. Snow also makes a passable, maybe slightly above average commando. Fang blows him out of the water, but Lightning only beats him out if built correctly. The final member of the upper mid tier is Fang's Sentinel. She's a slightly downgraded version of Snow's Sentinel, which still lands her in the upper tiers. The top tier. Fang makes one of the best saboteurs in the game. She has fast animations, almost all important skills, and the Pandora Spear. If she had Death, she would compete for best saboteur in the game. Hope's Ravager makes the third best chainer in the game with the highest magic stat of any character. Slap on Last Resort and you have a decent endgame mage. Hope is also a decent endgame medic as well. Again, because of his high magic stat, his heals hit hard. If he had better survivability, he might have beaten out Vanille. Lightning is the second best commando in the game. Her high speed, mid strength, and Axis Blade make her devastating in the right situations. Lightning also makes a damn good synergist when push comes to shove. Though she struggles with animations, she does get the majority of the spells. Just be ready to grind. Saz makes it to the top tier barely due to being the single best early and mid game synergist. His weapons are built for this paradigm, and accessing haste early on is a lifesaver. But in the end game, due to Hope's better versatility, he'll most likely be replaced. The God tier. Snow and Lightning compete for best Ravager in the game, and to be honest, it's really hard to decide who is better as they both excel here. Snow is the faster spellcaster with wicked fast animations, but Lightning has better equipment and, for what it's worth, better stats. Snow is the best Sentinel, and there's just no contest. There isn't another character better suited to tank attacks, and as he makes a decent AI partner, this is a very good thing, as the developers seem to overlook the fact that the controlled party member dying leads to a game over, so you probably don't want that person to be your tank. Hope is an average synergist until chapter 12. Then he becomes the best, as he both is equal to Saz in every way other than acquiring vigilance, and also makes a top tier medic and Ravager. Vanille is the best medic in the game as she has the stats and skills required while also being a decently tanky character. Vanille is also the best Saboteur in the game as she is the only character that gains the most broken spell in Final Fantasy XIII, Death. Though she does lack the useful slow spell, you just can't pass on this absurdly abusable late game tactic. And the final member of the God tier and final member of this list is Fang's Commando. She doesn't just have the highest damage potential of any character, but she also has all the skills required to obliterate any boss. Oh, and don't forget her busted skill Highwind. Today is the day I put a cap on the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy by ranking all monsters in Final Fantasy XIII-2. Thank you to my Patreon Pro member, Giovanni Morales, for requesting this list. That was the last bit of motivation I needed to cap off a project I've had in the works for nearly a year. The story of Final Fantasy XIII-2 follows two protagonists, Sarah and Noelle. In battle, these two are permanent party members capable of switching to different paradigms. Noelle is best as a commando, sentinel, and synergist, while Sarah works best as a saboteur, ravager, and medic. This leaves the third party member. You can have 3 monsters, each representing a paradigm, slotted into this third spot. These monsters range in usefulness, some being best for battle, while others are used outside of battle for certain events, such as chocobo racing. Today we're asking ourselves which monsters are best for your playthrough. We're considering stats, availability, usage as either a permanent party member or as an extremely useful infusion fodder, and finally the all-important feral links. If you're new to the channel, why don't you subscribe and become a member of the LCD family? Also, if you're looking for a good drinking game, take a drink every time I mispronounce one of these names. Son of a... Alright, let's pause for a minute. This is easily one of the longest lists I have ever researched, and during my time, I realized something important about this title. That is, that half the monsters aren't worth talking about. So here's a list of all the monsters I'm putting in the unranked tier. They're here because they're either simple fusion fodder, obtained so late in the game that it doesn't matter, are surpassed by others on this list, or I simply couldn't find enough data on them to place them in a tier. Anyway, we'll skip the tier and move to the low tier. The low tier is mainly comprised of monsters who are very niche, or happen to have important traits to pass on. I'll be moving through these pretty quick since we have so many. Poo-Poo's main reason for existing is its ability to increase item drop rate via its feral link. Valfador is an awesome Ravager that is obtained in the late to post game because he's one of the hardest DLC battles in the game. Nekton is a decent spellcaster and has the unique ability to cast slow via its feral link. Gigantar is a half-decent synergist with a fast execution speed. Narashima is one of the few monsters that can have the full ATB gauge of 6 segments. Amanjaku is awesome for infusion as they get all the end spells, which boost damage potential for other monsters on this list. Thexteron is a cost-effective synergist used often in the mid-game. Gandayax, Feral Behemoth, and Proto-Behemoth are decent monsters for your mid to late game builds. Gahongus is the earliest monster you'll encounter with the Faith and Bravery abilities. Albino Lobo, if found early, has great stats that stay paced throughout your entire playthrough. Apkalu and Swamp Monk are also decent mid-game monsters. Cactuar is a perfect counter to the side quest boss Yomi. Ultros is good, but too many other synergists blow him out of the water. Orion is a lesser version of Dragoon and has a short stay as your team's commando. Lancer is one of the most cost-effective sentinels, learning important skills like improved guard and improved ward. Gilgamesh, like Valfador, is a difficult late-game DLC boss who has some novel usage. Alright, we're going to split the mid-tier up into 2 sections, so let's start with the lower mid-tier.
Viking is one of the best saboteurs through the early and mid game with skills unavailable to Sarah and Noah. Don Tomberry is an amazing commando with the unfortunate passive of always being poisoned. Typhon is better than Ultros and works great for farming purposes. Cactorama's Feral Link casts Re-Raise on the party and is all around a decent medic. Apotamkin is a rare drop, but easily will be your best monster in the early game if acquired. Bookaboo Ace has an awesome Feral Link and makes for a great infusion monster for multiple reasons. Bookaboo is almost exclusively used for the ability Gil Finder 2 and will help you increase your gil in battle. Dendrobium is a cheap alternative to better saboteurs like Necrosis or Black Chocobo. Alright, that wraps up our lower mid tier. Let's move on to the upper mid tier. Amador is a great DLC monster who excels at fighting aerial enemies and disrupting attacks. Debris is almost as good as Cloudburst with half damage to all physical and elemental attacks. Cheliceratta has the improved debuffing passive. Navidon is a lesser Silver Chocobo with better tanking abilities. Pulse Gladiator is a slightly better version of Navidon, capable of resisting physical and magical damage. Flanator is a top tier mid-game healer that is only surpassed by medics like the white and green Chocobo. Caterpillar is the only monster with the passive Resist Elements plus 30%, which makes it important for infusions. Haguma is a very rare monster, but if required, it's the third best healer in the game. White Chocobo is the second best healer in the game, with the only reason it fell behind the green Chocobo as being that its Feral Link is physical based and thus very ineffective. Black Chocobo requires a long-term investment, but if you do so, it will tie with the next two monsters on this list. Necrosis is the same as Black Chocobo, but is the only monster with the passive Resilience plus 40%, making it extremely viable as your main saboteur. Jill Nabat is hot. Jill is a DLC saboteur that peaks early but has some amazing niche uses like stun-locking enemies. Unfortunately, saboteurs all fall short on this list as its paradigm is almost always dominated by Sarah. The top tier. Tonberry dishes out incredible damage as a commando. Pulse Knight is your early game sentinel with the plus 25% HP passive that makes it a key infusion fodder throughout the entire game. Red Chocobo is the second best Chocobo commando next to the Golden Chocobo and can easily be the mainstay on your team. Bunker Beast is tied for best sentinel in the late and post game. If infused with Metaguard, it will be immune to all ailments and be able to tank almost every single attack in the game. Snow's greatest barrier is his stupidly high HP boss battle, but if acquired, Snow has awesome stats and incredibly high HP, making him one of the best sentinels in the game. Goblin Chieftain lacks the HP of Snow, but has the Feral Link that buffs the entire party. Since the Sentinel paradigm is hardly required, having one that can buff the party ends up being one of the best strategies. The biggest reason why Twilight Odin didn't land on the God tier is that it's one of the most expensive monsters to max out. But if you put in the time, Twilight Odin statistically is one of the best commandos in the game. Saz is a great synergist who is surpassed by Purple Chocobo and Yakshini because of his lack of customizability. Omega could probably have landed on the God tier if its setup wasn't so complicated and its movement and attack animations weren't so slow. But if built right by giving it the ATB charge and siphon boost, Omega turns into an absolutely busted mess that sits on the top of the top tier. Alright, let's wrap this up with the God tier. Purple Chocobo is one of the best synergists in the game and will be the best choice when it comes to the late and post game. Dragoon is the cheapest commando to max out and comes with the best abilities in the game like Feral Speed 2, ATB Charge 2, and Armor Breaker. Green Chocobo is the best medic in this title, mainly because it can dish out some decent damage if given the Feral Speed passive. Spamming his Feral Link makes it ideal for monster hunting. Also make sure to infuse it with Asuna and Asunata from Flanator. Commando Lightning is one of the best commandos in the early and mid game. She's also key to getting Rav Lightning early in Chapter 2. She'll be replaced in the late game, but until then, Commando Lightning is absolutely busted. Golden Chocobo is pushed above Commando Lightning for two reasons. One is that if paired with the other Chocobos for the pack mentality bonus, it becomes better. And if you plan on using the Silver Chocobo in battle and not in races, Gold Chocobo is your second best option. Yakshini is the single best synergist for your party. It will be a mainstay until the Purple Chocobo is developed and able to replace it in the endgame. Cloudburst is the single best Ravager in the mid to late game, with one of the best Feral Links in this title, making it indispensable for the majority of your playthrough. Silver Chocobo is in the God tier because it's the best Sentinel in the game.
although if you want to build it out, it can nearly rival Sentinels like Snow and Bunker Beast. But the real reason it's here is its Chocobo Racing build, which allows it to become the best Chocobo in the game for the casino. This is important because the casino provides you with some of the best fusion material in the game. Chichu is pretty much broken. Its strength stat can easily be leveled over 1000, making it one of the best commandos in the game. Its only downfall is its inability to damage aerial enemies. Blue Chocobo is without doubt the single best non-DLC Ravager and possibly the single best monster in Final Fantasy XIII too. The only thing it lacks is the elemental spells, but those can be learned via infusion. And the final member of the god tier in top of this list is Ravager Lightning. Rav Lightning is an absolute god, and once infused with other important monsters will be devastating with wide-hitting AoE attacks and dishing out some of the most damage of any monster in the game. And there you have it, a tier list of the monsters in Final Fantasy XIII 2. If you're trying to figure out the best team for your playthrough, the Chocobos are probably your best bet. A gold, blue, and either green or purple Chocobo will round out your team nicely, and you'll get the Paradigm Pack mentality, making this the indisputed best monster pairing in the game. If you want to put some time into it though, Rav Lightning with either a fully built Twilight Odin or Omega alongside something like the purple Chocobo, Jill Nabat, Snow, or Green Chocobo is also an incredibly viable team. Anyway, let's get down to business. There are 71 Garbs you can find in the game. Each will boost Lightning stats and has slots for equipping important active and passive skills, as well as complements your overall schema. Oh right, schemas are your custom-built classes, which is a fusion of Garbs, weapons, accessories, adornments, shields, and abilities. If all this sounds confusing, then good. We're going to try to consider just the Garbs today, though their abilities to create game-breaking schemas cannot be ignored when rating these outfits overall. We're going to do something a little bit different as well. Each tier will not be in any particular order except for the top tier and God tier. Now, without further ado, I give you the tier. We're going to start this list off on a good note by talking about the only thing that we're all going to agree on, and that is that Astrolord is the worst Garb in the game, and there just isn't a contest. It has no open skill slots and is mostly a gimmick where the lower your HP falls, the stronger your spells get. Yeah, that's a terrible strategy. The last two Garbs on this tier is Pallas Athena and Celestial Body. You can only obtain Pallas Athena after gaining the Platinum Trophy, which is absolutely ridiculous. On top of that, the Garb's design is underwhelming and Heroic Guard, in practice, is useless. Celestial Body is only available in Japan and wasn't that great to begin with. Alright, that wraps up the tier. Let's talk about the low tier. As you can imagine, a game with so many Garbs is bound to have what we'll call filler. These are just novelties and are surpassed by so many other Garbs that we're just going to blaze through this list. Trigger warning, I'm sure you'll see some of your favorites. Mine are on here too. First is Art of War, which was a pre-order bonus. Next is Black Mage, which is obviously a magic DPS Garb that gets overshadowed by a lot of other magic DPS Garbs. Then we have Black Rose, Blue Mage, Carnival Crusher, Champagne Gold, and Cold Rebellion. Cosmic Crater is a disappointing and confusing DLC Garb. Then we have Crimson Bloom, Dangerous Blossom, Dance Macabre, Dark Orchid, Deja Vu, Dragon's Blood, and Duelist. Dust and Shadow gets the block ability and some decent resistance, while Heartstealer is an okayish evasion tank, while Hidden Justice is your average magic Garb. Next is Icy White, Ignition, Innocence, La Foldre, Lang Noir, La Automne, La Automne, and Lilitu. Loyal Servant is good for switching out schemas, but it will probably be replaced by Splendid Admiral pretty quick. The Moogle Queen schemata is interesting, but at the end of the day, just kinda stupid. Nocturne is as average a Garb as they come, and I can't believe I'm putting this in low tier. Nightmare, one of the coolest looking Garbs, is basic trash. Thanks, Square. Next we have Passion Rouge, Primavera, Providence, Red Mage, Sand Fox, and unfortunately School's Out as well. The next few on the list are some rather disappointing DLC Garbs. We have Shining Prince, Shogun, Sohei Savior, Tomb Raider, Utsusemi, and again, unfortunately, Sphere Hunter. How Square managed to screw that up, I don't even know. The shield it comes with is nice, but the garb is basic and non-essential. Next, we have Stone and Sand, Sun and Bloom, Ultimatus, Urban Outlaw, Vigilance, Violet Twilight, Water Chorus, White Mage, Witching Hour, and Woodland Walker. The final garb on the low tier is the Paladin, which comes with the awesome heavy guard ability, but is easily replaceable with Sacred Knight or Quiet Guardian. Whew! Now let's move to the mid tier, which functions similar to the low tier. These garbs aren't amazing, but they do stand out slightly in some ways. First, we have Candy Raver, which is a middle-of-the-road garb that can slightly boost attack with high HP. Shadow Trooper has the Beatdown ability, which adds to a staggering strategy. By equipping a spirit, you can change Beatdown to Jump, which gives you a ton of raw power. Vengeance also has Beatdown and is similar to Shadow Trooper. Purple Lightning is a great mage garb with incredible speed and stagger capabilities. Flower of Battle is a DLC garb that is used to save time and EP in-game using Metagard to heal. Of course, we also have the Midgard's Flower Girl garb, which is very similar to Flower of Battle. Intruder is built exclusively for switching schemas. If your ATB is low, it will cast Protect upon switching. Dragoon is another garb with beatdown that can be built into a staggering machine. Its damage output can rival Soldier First Class. Divergent is the absolute best healing garb out there. Its skill Life Regain will heal you if you are damaging an enemy with a debuff. Rhapsody and Rose and Siegfried are pretty devastating DPS garbs that are outclassed in late game. Helter Skelter complements a physical attacking build with its immense boost strength. Electronica is incredibly useful in early and mid game, but again falls off in late game. And finally, we have Dark Samurai, which again is a standard mid-tier candidate. Okay, we burned through the fodder. Let's get into the meat of this list with the top tier. First up is Soldier First Class, which can dish out some of the best damage in the game with Slayer, which gains a 2x multiplier to Heavy Slash's power. It's not as good as Soldier of Peace, but still very noteworthy. Splendid Admiral has Transform Faith and Bravery, which will trigger the buffs upon switching schemas. So paired with schemas that complement them, Splendid Admiral and Intruder can be perfect boss killers. Velvet Bouncer is one of the best physical attacking garbs for early and mid game. Its strength is raised by 10% by its auto ability, then Blitz raises it for even further, making it a garb that hits like a truck. Hunter of the Wild is one of the best early and mid game garbs with heavy slash ability. It doesn't stay as useful in late game, but can still hold its own. Bold Vanguard has great element resistance and effectiveness, as well as the ability Blitz. Amazon Warrior can break the damage cap while also delivering the fastest basic attacks with Speed Slash. It doesn't compete with Soldier of Peace, but still is a good stand-in since you can get it pretty easy. Dark Knight is another contender for best physical attacking garb in the game. Like the Amazon Warrior and Soldier of Peace, this garb can break the strength limit, while its ability Darkness is a better version of Blitz. Sacred Knight is an incredible physical tank that really only lacks magical resistance, but its skilled defensive strike increases the effectiveness of Heavy Guard and Light Guard. If you have the skills, this garb can negate almost all damage from every enemy in the game. I've read that many argue that Midnight Mauve is one of the best garbs in Lightning Returns. I obviously don't agree, but it still is pretty awesome. With its 100% ATB start and increased spell damage, it can become one of your best mages. Equilibrium, Dark Muse, and Mist Wizard's upgraded versions have the highest starting ATB in the game and great passive skills to carry them into late game. Guardian Corpse and Knight of Etro are two of the most versatile garbs in the game with 4 open slots and the ability to take them in any direction you'd like. Plus, you just can't go wrong with these callbacks to previous games. Spira's Summoner is almost a must-have DLC. Its element skill is basically broken with a 9.8 times multiplier that will guarantee instant death to almost every enemy in the game. Martial Monk is another strength cap breaker with the skill Whirlwind Kick. If you can get your timing down, Whirlwind Kick is no joke. It has a plus 300% damage multiplier. The final garb of the top tier is the Mikote dress. Aside from being one of the best looking garbs in the game, Mikote is your designated boss killer. Magic Slash gets a boost from both physical and magical debuffs up to 500%. On top of that, you have the Meta Guard ability that is just incredibly useful for your playthrough. The God tier. Alright, these next 3 garbs are hands down the best in the game and are the optimal garbs for your endgame schemas. First we have Cyber Jumpsuit, which is one of the best debuffers in the game and with the right equipment can absolutely destroy enemy stats and abilities. The only small downside is that Dispel can be highly situational. If it is built as either a physical or magical opposite to Quiet Guardian, these 2 classes make up a God tier duo. Speaking of Quiet Guardian, it is far superior to Cyber Jumpsuit when it comes to debuffs, though both can potentially have 100% physical or magical resistance. Quiet Guardian is just a little bit more versatile overall. Throw in Heavy Guard skill and you have a devastating Saboteur schema in the making. The final garb on the list, and quite possibly one of the ugliest, is Soldier of Peace. Not sure what they were going with this design. Either way, there isn't a skill in this game that can hit harder than a fully maxed out Artemis arrow. With the right garbs to support it, Soldier of Peace will destroy every single enemy in the game. Well, except for Ereshkigal, but whatever.
Final Fantasy XV was a disappointing title upon release. Having one of the most notorious development cycles of any Square game, it went down in infamy both inside and outside the company. The final product is good. Made better with additional patches and DLC years later. Also, this girl's named Cindy instead of Sydney, and I will never forgive Square Enix for this mess up. Now, with this open world lies a plethora of weapons, but there are a set of 12 unique weapons called Royal Arms that we'll be talking about today. These versatile arms make up some of the best equipment in the game, but there's a catch. They slowly, or sometimes quickly, drain your HP and MP. Despite that though, once you've collected all 12 of these bad boys, you'll unlock one of the strongest attacks in the game, the Armiger Unleashed. So today we're asking ourselves which Royal Arm is best in Final Fantasy XV. I'd like to thank the website GamerDecide.com for publishing one of the most useful articles on this topic. Though my list disagrees in some ways with theirs, I'd suggest checking it out for a second opinion. Also, if you like objective video game tier lists, then consider subscribing and checking out our Patreon page for perks. If you join the Pro tier, you can request your own video today. Now, without further ado, I give you the tier. The Sword of the Tall is almost counter-effective. It basically debuffs Noctis to the point where it's fighting for the other side. Sword of the Tall has the highest damage of any Royal Arm, but its moveset is absolutely terrible. First, it's slow and leaves Noctis open for attacks. Second, it is built strictly for single enemy combat, which is a rarity in this title. Oh, and did I mention it reduces your elemental resistance, making you vulnerable to magic attacks? What a joke. Next on the tier is the Mace of the Fierce. Though the mace doesn't debuff you as bad as the Sword of the Tall, it's still a major disadvantage in battle. Not only does it lower your resistance to bullets, it's also slow and lacks the attack stat of the Sword of the Tall. But its Warp Strike is decent, and well, that's about it. The low tier. The Star of the Rogue is a mid-game weapon obtained in Chapter 7. The only reason this bad boy didn't land on the tier with the others is that its Warp Strike has a multi-hit effect that, if used correctly, can actually be effective against larger enemies. Aside from that though, its moveset is terrible. I mean, to the point that it's nearly impossible to use, but if mastered, it won't be the worst weapon on this list. Sword of the Wise is obtained at the beginning of the game and comes with a double tap Warp Strike that can be useful in the early game. You can do some fairly easy cheese in battle, striking then running away. The main issue though is that the HP drain on this weapon is one of the highest of the Royal Arms, making it extremely difficult to use long term. Swords of the Wanderer may be the coolest looking weapon of the bunch. Overall though, they make for an average weapon, which is a shame.
Swords of the Wanderer has a straightforward moveset, and I mean straight. Versatility and attack direction is not this thing's forte. Also, it's a bit slow and lacks damage potential, which is disappointing. But aside from that, it can still be viable to use if you really want to. The mid-tier. Depending on how you view weapon viability, Bow of the Clever could land on the god tier. This long-range weapon is the king of cheese. Skirting enemies and firing barrages of attacks is the key to the bow's success. Aside from this though, the bow lacks any real purpose. You can't use it while airborne, and warp strikes are all but useless. The main reason you use it is for buffing magic and cheesing fights. Next on the mid-tier is the Shield of the Just. The shield is great for grinding AP by abusing its warp strike. It's also a stat boosting machine and imperative when trying to break off larger sections of enemies via its high crit chance. Using the phase button will heal your HP for the cost of MP. And finally, it can block unblockable attacks. The main issue here is that there are just better weapons on this list, meaning that the Shield of the Just is situationally useful. The final weapon in the mid-tier is the Blade of the Mystic. This is an early game story blade that is probably the most well-rounded of the royal arms. Its main draw is its strength buff that can be applied before battle, allowing you to prep for enemy encounters. Overall, it's the definition of mid-tier weapon. Not the best, but not the worst. The top tier. The Axe of the Conqueror is a hard-to-master weapon that can be highly effective if you play your cards right. This weapon has the highest HP drain of the royal arms. It also debuffs your vitality while in use. Now all of that sounds pretty bad, but if utilized in the right situations, the Axe of the Conqueror can use Blindside for immense damage, some of the highest in the game. Yes, the axe is a gamble, but one worth taking. The Sword of the Father is the single best royal arm in Final Fantasy XV. It has a massive strength and magic buff, and its final blow dishes out incredible damage. On top of all of this, its warp strike is MP free. It also has some of the lowest HP drain of these unique weapons. The main issue why the sword didn't land on the god tier though is it's the final weapon you obtain, and it's found in the final chapter of the game, making it the least available royal arm of the bunch. The final weapon in the top tier is the Scepter of the Pious. Of all the weapons, this is the most versatile. The Scepter has the combined moveset of all royal arms, meaning that it fits in every situation. It also has one of the best warp strikes for a hit and run strategy, making it a decent cheesing weapon as well. Its dark resistance makes it extremely useful for the end game enemies, and overall, you just can't go wrong with this in your arsenal. The God tier. Though it's obtained in Chapter 12, the Trident of the Oracle is an absolute beast. Its basic moveset is only surpassed by the katana, and the after images left by Noctis deal chip damage that adds up quickly. But the main reason this trident is so devastating is its ability to stun lock enemies using the aerial dive warp strike. This makes almost every battle a cakewalk. The final weapon in the god tier and top of this list is the Katana of the Warrior. Obtained in Chapter 10, this insanely fast sword has an extended warp strike distance and some of the fastest combos in the game. Overall, the utility here is simple. It has the range of the projectile weapon with incredible warp strike speed, coupled with the damage of the axe or the Sword of the Tall. If it had the stun locking capabilities of the trident, then it would have needed a tier all to itself. Overall, this is the best royal arms in Final Fantasy XV, both in damage and usage, as well as availability. And that's our list. How'd we do? Let me know in the comments which is your favorite weapon. Thank you to all my Patreon members, and if you would like to join the Pro tier and request your own list, click on the link in the description below. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Bonus round. Top 10 best dressed Noctises. Number 10, Choco Mog outfit. Number 9, Magitech armor. Number 8, Noctis figurine. Number 7, Hazmat costume. Number 6, Fancy outfit. Number 5, Festive ensemble. Number 4, Noctis's fatigues. Number 3, Royal raiment. Number 2, King's raiment. And number 1 is the greatest crossover in all of gaming history, the Cup of Noodle hat.